properly, and that we can now have our focus on ensuring that we keep on looking at the environmental impacts as well as the social economic movement in the future. So I call my fellow councillors to also support this and vote in favour. Thank you.
Is there any speakers against? Can we put this to the vote, please? Happy to put it to the vote, councillors? Yeah, all those in favour, please?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. So now we're up to the economic development and tourism strategy, and it's that council adopt the 2018-2020 economic development and tourism strategy. Do we have a mover? Councillor Keel. Do we have a seconder? Councillor McEwen. Thank you, Councillor Keel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The updated strategy clearly reflects the Council's objectives for the economic development policy going forward for 2018 to 2020. Our objective is to strengthen economic growth and prosperity from our Council plan, and it's outlined in this strategy. It provides the latest economic data and priority projects and provides direction for future business and employment growth in our Shire. It will also assist in attracting more visitors and new residents to our area. I commend the staff for their hard work and professional report.
Thank you, Councillor Keel. Councillor McEwen, would you wish to speak?
Very briefly, Madam Mayor, I think this is an excellent strategy and report. I think the staff should be commended for it. It is quite broad in concept. It deals with the major opportunities and some of the structural issues, and I commend this to my fellow councillors.
Thank you. Is there other speakers? Any speakers against? No. I'll put it to the vote then, councillors, if you're happy, please. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now we have the 3.1 interim accommodation for the tenants, the community of the current Korumburra Library site. Do I have a mover? Councillor McEwen. Councillor Skinner, second, please. Councillor McEwen.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is an exciting step. We've been going through a long and convoluted process going back many years about having a supermarket in Korumburra. We're now at a stage where we've potentially got that, but in order to facilitate that, we need to have the people moving out of the current building down there, the library, the Rotary Art Collection, the Historical Society, and there's some other users of that site. What this motion provides for is, in my view, a cost-effective way of providing interim accommodation. There is going to be a lag of up to 3 years between when the people vacate the premises and when a new hub is likely to be there. Arrangements have been made through negotiations, which I understand have gone very well with the various stakeholders. The library will move into the kindergarten, and the various funds have been allocated for the construction of that. For the redevelopment of the site. The Rotary Art Collection is going to be housed in the Michael Street Council Administrative Depository, so that's protected, and that will be available for future display. The Historical Society is going to go to the Senior Citizens Club. There are negotiations with other temporary users of it. This is a milestone. This is a necessary stepping stone to be able to have bigger and brighter things for Korumburra. So I commend this to my fellow councillors.
Councillor Skinner.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I reiterate, it's an exciting project. It's Korumburra's time in a lot of ways. The library issue, the relocation of the library and the shared stakeholders who use that library service, it did create community concern and angst, and I'm really proud of our administrative team and our councillors of how we've approached that, very collaborative and consultative in terms of listening to what people concerns and finding a mutually beneficial and affordable solution.
Sorry.
That's okay. You'll note in the report, Councillor McEwen didn't go through it, but there is money in our budget for the refurbishment. We always knew this was going to be part of a long-term plan. I am the council representative on the West Gippsland Regional Library Board, so I know from that side that the Library Board have been very closely involved in this in terms of the library requirements. So we had a site visit there a little while ago. Actually, it's a fantastic opportunity. It's right in the centre of town. Issues around access for the delivery van and all ability access have been able to find solutions. And I think, I think it's going to be an exciting time, and it'll be great to see this all happening. It feels like, yes, we're getting there. So from the Library Board, I know that they're really happy with this. And from the community's perspective, I believe they'll also be happy with this. So I'm really happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Is there any speakers against? I'll put it to the vote then, Councillors. Are you happy? All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now we have the Paths and Trails strategy, and the recommendation is that Council adopts the 2017 Paths and Trails strategy and the attachment 4.1.1 and publish on Council's website. Do we have there's more to that. Do we have a move?
Madam Mayor, I would like to move to defer this motion until
I can't accept just to defer it. I need to find out why you want to defer it, Councillor. So I'll ask for a seconder on that.
I'll second it, and on the basis of our discussions before, we would like to defer it on the basis of inconsistencies.
I think it's going to be
addressed.
Apologies.
Just Jeremy, I think that we've got to go the other way. You've got to go to the move, Jeremy. You're over eager, but we need to discuss why you want to defer it. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. So the motion before us is that Council defer item 4.1, the strategy review, Paths and Trails strategy 2017 to until its ordinary council meeting on the 30th of May 2018 in order to complete further work to rectify the inconsistencies in the current report, and also to include and consider the outcome of the Section 223 process in regard to the whole trail. Will I get speaking?
You've got the floor, Councillor.
Okay. The reason being, at the 11th hour, due to administrative inconsistencies, the report, the executive report and the report in the agenda didn't fully reflect what was in the strategy. Things were coming in and out of the strategy, particularly in relation to the Waratah Way. So at some point last week, it was determined that it wasn't in the strategy and it should have been in the strategy. So then there was a proposed amendment coming through to put it back in the strategy. Then it was taken out of the project list. Now there was another further amendment to put it back in the project list, and there was general discussion around that. And equally, then the report doesn't actually match that. So there's been a few little inconsistencies. So rather than trying to tweak with that at the 11th hour like this, I believe that we need to go back and do some more work on ironing out those inconsistencies in the report to fully reflect particularly in relation to the Waratah Way, the fact that it has been identified in the February 2017 Community Direction Statement, which was done with the Sandy Point community and with council support to do that. It's a very strong project, yet we also understand there's significant obstacles and issues around it, and we're absolutely, I'm not acknowledging those, but I believe that it needs to be included in the strategy and the project list in order to potentially look for a creative solution. So I'm not suggesting that we have the solution now, We also will endeavour to work with those communities to understand the issues around any projects like that. I would actually like to see that our whole community strengthening approach becomes much more fluid and innovative and able to respond and work with the community so that the plans are realistic, they can be reflected in through our own strategies and our council plan. Similarly, we know that the whole mountain trail is an issue that has potentially contentious, and there's wildly opposing points of view on that. So we have gone out to public consultation about that, and there's an opportunity for people to present about that, and then council will determine a position. So it seems to me to make sense to wait until that part has been addressed, and whatever the outcome or the recommendations for that will then be able to be included in the Paths and Trails strategy. So instead of adopting something that's a little bit ad hoc today and then coming back and reviewing it in 2 or 3 months, I think it's a better strategic approach to work with our communities to inform these strategies, understand all the issues and parameters, bring people along with the journey. It underpins everything we do in council, or it should underpin everything we do in council. I'd really like to, I think 5 minutes.
I could tell you've got a minute more, but I don't know whether I need to.
There we go. Anyway, this seems to be a better strategic approach to me, to look at the whole document as a whole, all the parts make up the whole. So that's the reason I think we should defer this motion until those things have been addressed.
Councillor Rich, if you could find something to say.
Well, Madam Mayor, I won't have 5 minutes to say on this particular one, but I certainly concur with many things that Councillor Skinner has said. In particular, which is what I've said since the day that I got into council, so I was lucky enough to be voted for, structured and strategic approach. Because if we do ad hoc things and we're always chasing our tail, we're not efficient, we're not effective.
Councillor, we're talking about a strategy.
No. The reason that we are deferring it, Madam Mayor, is because in its current form, it is not a structured strategic approach. It has got things that have been taken in, put out. It hasn't incorporated this, so I beg to disagree that I'm on topic. And that's why, because that we need to be getting the best outcomes for our community. I'd like to see other things in there, exactly as Councillor Skinner said, community engagement. If we have a structured strategic approach, you should be able to go to any community and say, right, if we follow these guidelines and then we go and work with our Shire Council, then we should be able to achieve one of their objectives. Now at the moment, it didn't seem like that when I read it. It did seem inconsistent, so therefore, that's why I'm supporting Councillor Skinner's deferment motion. So let's make sure it's no longer inconsistent. Let's make sure that it's structured and strategic, and that it's a document that can stand the test of time, that we don't have to go and spend money on redoing it again in a short period of time. And a short period of time being, thank you very much, I hope to vote in favour of this deferment.
Well done, Councillor Rich. 1.2 minutes. Any speakers against deferring, please? If there's none, I'll put it to the vote, please. All those in favour of the deferral?
Get it right.
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Well, we now have item 5.1, the MAV vendor panel fuel cards contract. Do I have a mover? Councillor Argento. Is there a seconder? Councillor Keel, please. Councillor Argento.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Like all our different departments, Council is constantly reviewing and looking at better ways to save some money for our ratepayers. In this regard, we're referring to fuel cards, which our fleet needs to use, our road crews, and they have to be located in all parts of our shire. So as the recommendation says up there, to appoint BP as well as Shell Card Viva Energy. Councillors, I hope you'll endorse this motion, as it will be saving Council significantly in reduced costs, because we achieve great savings due to the consumption of fuel that we use throughout our departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to... Is there any speakers against? No speakers against, so I'll move to the vote, please, councillors.
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you. 6.1, centralised statutory valuations, the valuation of the Land Act options. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Argento, did you move that?
Obviously I did.
Thank you. Well, that's what I've got. Is there a seconder? Councillor McEwen, seconds, thank you. Councillor Argento, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this relates to the valuing of properties, and as you know, the state government's moving to an annual valuation, where we can choose to opt in or opt out. Our council is choosing to opt out. We believe we have sufficient resources within the council to continue on our own, and we'll look at how it progresses before we may choose to opt in at a later stage. So I'll leave it at that and hope that you'll endorse this one as well.
Councillor McEwen, thank you.
Very briefly, Madam Mayor, I personally see this as a grab for money by the state government, if you ask me. However, leaving that aside, this is the most cost-effective approach for us, and what it does provide us is we've got a highly competent local valuation team. We will get consistency in approach. We will get good understanding of the local property market, and to me this makes economic sense, social sense in terms of the employees, but sense in terms of having a quality valuation that we can trust locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any speakers against, please? No speakers against. Could I put it to the vote, please?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
6.2, Bald Hills Wind Farm Investigation Plan, Councillor Argento. Are you moving this, are you?
With the addition.
With the addition. Can you stand up and read that out, please?
Sorry. With the addition of content on the screen. Just scroll down there and ready.
I'll get, after he's finished, I'll see if there's a second as well. Or do I do it now?
So point 2, would you like me to read that out?
Yes, I would.
So eventuates that the chief services are suitably qualified, so that's not too far. Directs the chief executive officer to advise James C. Smith, who is the appointed person, I'll speak about shortly, and associates that the complainants have stressed to individual councillors the need for noise monitoring to be a part of the investigation. Particular attention and consideration to be given to noise monitoring by a suitably qualified acoustician as part of the investigation. If it is decided by James C. Smith and Associates that noise monitoring is required to be undertaken as part of the investigation, provide the Chief Executive Officer with details and a quotation for a suitably qualified acoustician. Yeah, that word. To undertake this work. Yeah, that's it. Point 2, eventuates the Chief Executive Officer will procure the services of the suitably qualified acoustician to undertake noise monitoring in accordance with Council's procurement policies and processes. Across the bottom bit, which is part of the original motion.
Do I have a seconder on this motion, please? Councillor Brown, are you second? Thank you. Councillor Argento.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you'll be aware, this discussion in relation to the Bald Hills Wind Farm and the noise complaints we've received has been widely reported and of great concern to those affected down in that area. Council has moved forward and in looking if this motion is successful to appoint Mr Smith, who has worked in the public health sector for over 45 years in local government, state government and private sectors. He has a wealth of experience and is best suited in regard to the Health and Wellbeing Act. And as you can see from the amendment, the addition I've included, he has the ability to also appoint an acoustician if he believes it's required and necessary during his investigations. So I'd ask councillors to consider this in order to ensure that we alleviate the concerns of all those involved in this situation and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gento. Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak?
So hopefully James E. Smith is able to bring about a swift resolution to this issue, and the amendments that Councillor...
The additions
that Councillor Gento put in. Hopefully, if there are those issues that need to be looked into further, these additions will deal with those issues.
Any speakers against? Councillor Rich.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Madam Mayor. I think the situation that we find ourselves in is unfortunate from the start. State government approved the plans for the wind farm, and then they dumped onto our local council the responsibility for monitoring the development process. That was always going to be difficult for a small-sized planning department with a $420 million project. However, that doesn't negate our responsibilities in any way, shape or form. It just shows that our responsibilities are difficult. Now, in this particular case, that has been exacerbated by what I consider to be not particularly great actions from our executive. We have left ourselves...
Councillor?
Yes?
Could you please be seated?
Yes.
Put your mic on.
Put my mic on. At this point in time, until we have a hearing and that decision on the 20th of March is decided, I'd ask you to retract those statements, please, Councillor. And I'm asking you to think very strongly about... okay, Councillor, or I will call... You've got a direction from the Chair.
What is the direction specifically?
I'm asking you to retract the statement regarding poor direction from the Chair or the CEO? Something like that. I believe...
come on.
Excuse me, I don't believe you can make those statements until we've been to the next stage, Councillor.
I retract those statements and I will replace them with we have had questionable.
Thank you.
We have had questionable.
I'll ask the gallery to be quiet or to remove themselves, please.
We have had questionable.
I beg your pardon. You have to be quiet to be here, and I won't ask again. Thank you. Please.
We have had questionable advice that has led us to a situation where we are now going back to court because we have not complied with a specific Supreme Court order step. That is absolutely on file as a fact. Now, I look at this now and I think to myself, now, we only received this in the last couple of weeks to have a look at this particular solution. And I wonder, from the start, as I said to you, my goal is the best outcome for this community. What is our best outcome? Yes, we were left with a difficult situation that they put in a wind farm that we couldn't actually control. Right? But when we did have a difficulty that we had a small planning department that wasn't given extra resources to do the job. So now we have to work out what is the best path forward. And I do not believe that this particular motion is going to deliver that. And so that's why I implore my fellow councillors to not support such motions, which will more than likely end up costing us further legal fees. We need to work with the opposition. This is a civil situation. There may be a criminal component, but that is not to do with the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is how do we work with our community to determine what the issues are, how we evaluate those issues, how we move forward, and more than likely, which will involve the wind farm itself. Because it's their responsibility to do noise monitoring. It's their responsibility. They're the ones making the money. So I sit there looking at this at the moment, and I know that my fellow councillors would like very much to come up with a path. And they have tried very hard this morning to amend this so that it somehow finds a middle ground. My problem is, I don't believe that finds middle ground. I believe that that actually may add more fuel to a fire rather than less. So therefore I employ us to not go down this path, to work with the plaintiff in this circumstance to come up with what is an acceptable methodology to both parties. Once we've accepted that methodology, then we've got a backstop. Every time some other dispute comes up, we go back to that methodology rather than going back to court each time, which costs us a fortune. And it's all good and well to say that, oh, we've been advised by Maddox lawyers. But you take the advice. I can't say, wait a tick, the lawyer gave me advice, don't blame me. He told me to say this. Come on. It doesn't work like that. If you go and get legal advice from someone and then you stand up and represent that as your position, that is your position. So therefore, on that basis, I cannot support this particular motion, and I ask my fellow councillors to think very carefully before actually.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Is there any other speakers, please? Councillor Skinner.
Myself into the lines then. I appreciate what you're saying, but we have been trying to get to a better solution. I think we have found ourselves at this point now. My understanding is that we do have to undertake an investigation. My understanding is that this person is highly qualified in the health arena, and I believe we have reached a position I feel more comfortable with in the additions that Councillor Argento has included, which relates specifically to noise monitoring. I would agree that let's not ever get to this kind of point again, even though we are the meeting a sandwich in terms of, as you illustrated, Councillor Rich, that so the Shire has ended up with a role of compliance in the middle there, really. However, we can always review how we've gone about things. Communication and working with our community, I'm going to bang on about that for the next 3 years. That is a cornerstone of how we should be operating, sharing information, trying to come to a mutually beneficial solution and work towards a negotiated outcome and not funding lawyers' pockets, basically, I think. So while I understand what you're saying, I would also ask you, what else would you suggest then? And I can't do that. So given we're at this point, given that we do need to undertake an investigation, and given that that is one of the reasons that Mr. Townley is going back to the court to explain the situation, I'm happy to support the additions to this motion.
The motion and the additions. Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Councillor McEwen.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I may borrow a term from our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, this is the world of woe. If you look at what's actually happened, the Supreme Court made a directive on the 29th of August last year that Council responds within 2 weeks as to how they're going to deal with the issue. There was no response by Council. My understanding is that 3 lawyers' letters, 1 email, was sent from the plaintiff's lawyer to Council's lawyer requesting a response. There was no response, which is in contravention of, in fact, the court order, in my opinion. We were then advised on the 15th of December by the lawyer that we've got 3 days or otherwise they're going to take Supreme Court action, which is quite a reasonable thing given there's almost 5 months delay in the response. There was no response from Council or from Council's lawyers, and therefore on the 18th they acted on the thing and went to court. There's been no cost ordered so far, but the costs are likely, if you go back on the previous case, to be the order of $20,000 for us and 20 plus potentially for the plaintiff. So we've lost $40,000, in my opinion, or around that, because we didn't fulfil the requirements of the Supreme Court order. We are now faced, and this is the dilemma, with potential further legal action. The issue that I've got substantially, that I've sent a memo to my fellow councillors and to the CEO. If you read the joint memorandum of the 29th of August that was agreed to by both parties in the Supreme Court, they make 7 mentions of noise assessment. Now, I'm in a very difficult position because for some strange and obscure reason, the brief for the consultant study is secret. So I'd be in contravention of the Local Government Act if I started to talk about the brief. However, I've got some serious concerns, without getting into detail, that the brief is totally inadequate and doesn't deal with the issues that was substantially agreed to by Council in the joint memorandum agreed to in the Supreme Court on the 29th of August. And that's clause 718A, 18C, 25 and 9A. We're in breach. I believe that we're in breach of those requirements for a noise assessment. Councils are elected under the Local Government Act to be responsible for the proper oversight and direction of council. We are guided in that by advice that we receive from officers. However, at the end of the day, the buck stops with us. We have now had a situation in 2 legal matters where we're now approaching $300,000 of costs incurred by council or indeed by ratepayers on actions that were deferred and stepped away from.
Councillor McEwen, you're not sticking to the order of business, please. And this is about endorsing the independent monitor, the investigator in the plan. You're off track. Could you please? You've got a couple more minutes, Councillor. So if you could just stay on track, but not go back to your same spiel.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. We're talking about costs. We're talking about another $33,000 worth of costs, which, in my opinion, are not actually going to meet the requirements that we've already agreed to in the joint memorandum in the Supreme Court on the 29th of August last year. I'm torn in this situation because I can see the intention of Councillor Argento of trying to find a middle way through this, but I'm genuinely torn. I think we've gone part of the way, but the really serious concern I've got is that this will end up in court anyway. And there will be a challenge to, in fact, the brief and the consultant. Now, the consultant is quite clearly highly qualified in nuisance and public health, but they have got no stated qualifications in noise assessments whatsoever. That partly addresses it. So part of me is saying we should support this, but it comes down in the end to a matter of principle. We as councillors have a responsibility to ratepayers to ensure that we're exercising oversight over the decisions that have been made. All that I can see is a substantial amount of money has already been wasted on adversarial legal relations. My view, personally, I take what Councillor Skinner talks about engagement, we should be talking to the local parties about the brief, although we're allowed to because it's secret, but we should be talking about the brief and say, ask a simple question. Does this satisfy your concerns? Would you be happy with us proceeding with this brief and hiring a certain qualified person? So as I said, I am really torn. But at the end of the day, the elected councillors are responsible for the expenditure of money, and I've got grave concerns that even though this is even though this is an improvement motion, it doesn't actually go front.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please?
Do I have a right to reply to Councillor Skinner's?
No. Sorry, Councillor Rich. Worth a try, but no. Any other speakers? Who seconded it? Aaron. Did he speak yet? Yes, he spoke. Yes. Councillor Argento.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've heard from Councillor Rich and Councillor McEwen. We've seen some numbers flushed about. Not sure about the accuracy of those numbers. They seem to be a bit high to me. But this is in fact not a new issue. 15 years ago, the Chura Wind Farm was up against the same issues. The Stanfield Corporation there ended up buying out the property owners and demolishing houses that were too close. So the state government now enacted a process where wind turbines aren't allowed to be built in a kilometre, I believe it is now, of houses. So we're back here sort of again 15 years later. I do believe my motion, as it stands up there, addresses the issue. The brief, the council is confident, I am confident that the person we've used, we have to engage for this process, will consult and will speak to those involved and hopefully address their issues and their concerns and actually listen basically to what they actually are. I would hope, councillors, you you look at this motion for what it is, and it's a genuine attempt to rectify what had gone on in the past and move forward. So I hope you will endorse this and move forward.
Thank you. All those in favour, councillors? All those in favour?
It's Councillor Skinner, Councillor Gento, Councillor Hill, Councillor Brunt, Councillor Brown and Councillor Keel.
All those against, councillors?
Councillor Rich and Councillor McEwen. The motion is passed, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move to 7.1. It's a notice of motion 712 seeking state government funding for the South Gippsland community houses. Do we have a mover? Councillor McEwen, and a seconder, Councillor Rich. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A more pleasant topic, I would have thought. Neighbourhood houses play a pivotal role in communities. The state government made a previous commitment to increase funding for neighbourhood houses. That has not occurred. This motion is seeking that we write to Minister Mikakis, Minister for Families, Children and Youth Affairs, in terms of advocating for increased funding for neighbourhood houses. There are three particular things that the neighbourhood houses group are pushing across the state. One is a coherent and strategic neighbourhood house coordination program with a simple and understandable formula of funding that would provide at least 30 to 35 hours a week for each neighbourhood house. The second one, which is partly implicates us, is that there should be growth funding to meet changing community needs. We've got certain parts of our shire that aren't covered by neighbourhood houses. At the moment, we can't get additional funding because it's not allowed for within the allocation. And the third one is that there'd be capacity building for quality and sustainability of neighbourhood houses, particularly in remote and rural areas. All of these things, I think, make eminent sense. It's interesting. There is a balance between taxes we pay and outcomes that we get at the end of the day. But unfortunately, in many ways, we're very slow learners. We now know that for every dollar invested in preschool education, there's a sevenfold return to the community. I would argue we're in a very similar situation with neighbourhood houses, and there is certainly anecdotal evidence and certain survey work that's been done that there's a 65% improvement in health and wellbeing of people who attend neighbourhood houses. There is certainly a major role that they play for socially isolated people in terms of connecting. There's certainly a major role they play in re-engaging people in education, and two of our neighbourhood houses are involved in food provision for local communities and emergency support. Arguably, in my view, an investment in neighbourhood houses plays a significant dividend. And certainly, if you look at the figures, we've got between 20 and 25% of communities with a neighbourhood house are involved in. That is the same as sporting bodies, men's sheds and other arts and cultural bodies. They are part of the fabric of communities, and they're really important in that sense. They give people a sense of connection and a sense of belonging. And I must own up, in my youth, going back in 1972, I was involved in setting up the first community house in Australia, the Box Factory in Adelaide Square Mile. And Nunawading, I think, later that year formed the, I have a dispute because I know the person who formed that, but the second house. Depends on which month you take as the origin. But I've been involved in this for a long period of time. They do transform people's lives. They have got a track record of dealing with people who are socially isolated, single mums and others, and being able to build a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, and actually have those people go on and get employment through education and training. This is a very small thing that we can do to support this initiative for many of my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ridge, please. I was going to go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to actually thank Councillor Skinner. She has actually had much to do with this particular field, and I want to draw awareness to that. But it's interesting, the reason that I wanted to support it is I do come from a liberal conservative background. I believe in business rationalism, and I've always supported that stuff. Whereas what I have noticed since coming onto council is that the more funds you do spend, which I'm going to support council, the more funds you do spend on community in one area, the more savings you have in another area. And this starts having very large long-term impacts. Usually it's over a 10 or 20 year time frame,
Most politicians and most sort of economic things are looking at 5 to 10. So if you invest now in something along these lines, the results that you will get will start paying a dividend if you want to look at it from a purely financial or economic rationale. Will pay dividends, maybe not in 2 years, but in 5, 10, 20, 30, and it's exponential from there. And so not only do I think that social studies are quite wonderful programs to see the engagement that people get in communities, especially more remote communities, I'm also wanting to advocate that I see it as an economic responsibility, not just a social responsibility, because that way we're not just trying to appeal to people's heartstrings, so to speak. We're actually doing both. So this particular initiative, the more I've looked into it, the more that I've seen the type of good that it does in the community. It's a no-brainer to stand up. Of course we should be supporting these sort of things. It engages people. It means that their health is better because they've got greater engagement in the community. There's different facets and fields. People lose a job, a partner dies. This is one of the things that can actually bring communities together in very interesting ways that no amount of money throwing at it at the time could possibly do. So that's why employers to actually hold our state government to account for offering us something and try and actually get it out of them. But I also think that everyone in our region that works in these community houses, they deserve commendation a hell of a lot more than I. I just get to stand up here and advocate for it at the end of the day. But I proudly do that because I think it's quite a wonderful program. So on that basis, I hope we adopt this and we move forward from there. Thank you very much.
Any speakers against advocating for this? You'd like to speak, Councillor Skinner?
Because I'd like to make a couple of points of clarification. What Councillor McEwen and Councillor Rich said is absolutely true. Local houses is the heart of the community. Just wanted to clarify in this motion, we are not seeking to fund this in our budget. This is an advocacy role, along with fellow other councils who have supported their community houses or neighbourhood houses by writing a letter to the Minister in support of the sector-wide budget campaign. So in 2014, the whole sector was about nearly 400 neighbourhood houses across Victoria, governed by a peak body called Neighbourhood Houses Victoria. Then there's a whole pile of networks around the state, and so we belong to the Gippsland network, and then within those networks there are smaller clusters. So in South Gippsland we have 4 neighbourhood houses or community houses, community centres. But one important part that was not in, so the 2014 election campaign, there was promises about additional funding to bring houses up to a minimum 20 hours a week. That was the only thing that they delivered on. Support for the network, it's really important to share stories and share the network. And the advocacy role across the whole sector from the peak body. These are really, really important things. So so this is asking the state government coming up to this election and the upcoming budget to acknowledge and honour their promises. So that's all we are doing is, as a council, we are advocating for our community houses in the wider picture of the sector across the whole of Victoria. I think all of our neighbouring councils, have sent off this letter. There's been press releases. We've had meetings with Danny O'Brien and Harriet Shing. It's great publicity across the region. Support. You will see Jeremy Hall, Councillor Rich holding these up. This is a postcard campaign that the peak body has coordinated to push the government to honour their commitment 4 years ago. So all what this motion is asking is a letter of support from the Mayor to the Minister in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Those men just didn't do the same. Thank you. All those in favour of this advocacy role?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. 7.2, are we up to? 7.2, it's a notice of motion And Councillor Skinner's putting her hand up out of the blocks. And Councillor Rich is going. We don't know what you're seconding yet, I don't think, Councillor Rich.
That's right.
So I've just got to back.
Yes, so I am going to move the notice of motion that Council receive a report outlining the costs and timeframes to develop and implement a Venus Bay precinct plan at or before its ordinary council meeting on the 30th of May 2017. So we're taking those points away, and that's the motion that I'm asking for a seconder.
So you've moved points 1 and 3.
The bold is what I'm moving.
What we made the notice of motion on.
That's the notice. That's the recommendation she's got. Thank you. Do we have a seconder with that?
That makes sense. I thought we both moved
So that-
Councillor Rich.
Yes. Councillor Rich is the seconder. Sorry, Councillor. I'm just. Right. Thank you. That is the recommendation, Councillor Rich. Do you second it?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rich is the seconder. Councillor Skinner.
Make sure that that's true.
Yeah, that's what you put
It's
up.
the bold.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Okay. The Venus Bay Structure Plan or Urban Design Framework. There's a number of documents that have been created in Venus Bay over a long period of time, but things are changing really rapidly. Certainly in our coastal communities, but certainly in Venus Bay. One of the triggers for undergoing this work has been some contention around parking in Venus Bay, in peak periods in particular. So we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that come to Venus Bay. Generally speaking, one doesn't plan for a peaks. We plan to 85%. Local community, the businesses and the visitors and residents are all looking for better, more structured approach to the undeniable growth in seasonal visitation and the growth of the resident population in Venus Bay as well. In the past, what we've seen has been a very ad hoc approach of we'll fix a little bit there, we'll build an extra car park over here. So it's not, we're approaching it, I believe, back to front. We need to have a better precinct area and the way that business supports the tourism economy, the visitor economy, and how we can get better at acknowledging the concerns of the local community, the concerns of visitors, the fact that it is an unusual place in terms of a township zone right bang up against a national park. There's multi-stakeholders in terms of emergency services and parks and DELP and businesses and community groups, etc. Anyway, we need to get much better at that. So that's why I'm calling for, at this previous summer where I had the pleasure of fellow Coastal Ward councillors Argento and Rich doing volunteer bus driving duty, as have members of our audience over here, done that in the past. So that's one of the ways that the community is determined to address parking congestion at the beach. So there are community-led solutions. But equally, we need to work better as a council at planning and articulating a community vision and having a plan so we can chip away at it and not having an ad hoc approach. So things are moving fast. What we've got is out of date. We need to update and create a develop and implement a precinct plan. Thank you.
Councillor Rich, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. It was a joint notice because we discussed this. There's a number of issues in Venus Bay, as well as in all of our coastal areas, that seem to have been a secondary priority of the Shire for some time, which obviously we'd like to advocate for them to become primary priorities. And I did go down to Venus Bay on a number of occasions this summer, and I was very impressed to see the community culture that they have down there. And you do sit there going, well, wait a second, there doesn't seem to be a clear delineation of how things are supposed to be working. And I know that there's advocacy for a skate park, which is a petition that's going to be put forward today, which I think is a fantastic asset for the area. But then the question comes, where should it go? And I'm like, well, what is it before it's he said, she said, or it's a pet project from somewhere, or anything like that? Let's put that to the side and go, what is the structure? Where is our precinct? Where are the main movements of people from A to B? Is it by road? Is it by car? Is it by the community bus? Therefore, when we take those into account, where's the parking going to go? Where's the skate park going to go? Where do the parents be able to? So these are quite straightforward, fundamental things. I wanted to take it away from being lobbying, because I don't like backroom deals at all. I would much rather someone go, here's a structured approach. We need to have car parking, beach access. We need to have all of those bits and pieces. And then we work out, right, well, where's the best way that we can account and plan for that with what we've got now? Then obviously you do the low-hanging fruit, the things that we can afford, that within our budget, we do them quite quickly. Then those other ones, we then see if we can advocate to get funding in the future from the state or federal government, but without a structured plan, without something that shows what we're trying to achieve and why. Number one, we're not going to attract private investment. We're not going to attract government investment in terms of grants. So I see this as a way of taking up the he said, she said individual arguments and going, right, well, I think we need a skate park and I think we need car parking. Now, it's not up to me to choose where they both go, but I would like the input of our professional planners, who I know are very good at their job. They're very good at their job. And I would like that so that we can sit down and be presented that information, and then our comments become relevant as to, well, does it have to be there, or what happens if... So therefore we're actually talking about things in putting our input into the right places, rather than having this silly argument, I don't agree or do agree. So I'm hoping that this is supported by our fellow council. It has brought forward an aspect of the coastal spaces strategy that we're looking to form at the moment. But I think it's been brought forward because it has an urgent need. There is a current situation that has to be done there. So in a way, it's just bringing it to the priority side of things. It's not outside our overall strategic and structured approach, even though we are elevating it because there are specific issues to deal with at the moment. Safety, safety is one of the key issues. We've got shared roadways between bikes and children, this, that and the other. All of these things to do with the precinct. Now, I think we've got open spaces strategy, but that will be coming up in our other strategies relatively soon. So this is a precinct plan looking between the surf club, the main commercial area, the community centre, and probably the entrance through to town. So those will be the main areas of concern that we'll be looking at, because that's where the majority of traffic comes through. So if we can deal with that, then everything else will come back in its appropriate time. So thank you, and I applaud you to support.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Is there any other speakers? Are you speaking against, Councillor?
I'm speaking for, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The worst thing that we can do is to allow a situation to develop in Venus Bay where we're going to have to fix up the mistakes after the fact. It will be far more expensive to try and retrofit a precinct plan in there that works for a much larger population. The reality is that Venus Bay is changing. I read some of this Parks and Trails stuff last night, with some of the comments on Parks and Trails. The reality is, for better or worse, Venus Bay is being transformed in a biological sense because people are building houses that go from fence to fence. The nature of Venus Bay is changing quite rapidly. We've got to recognise that Venus Bay, when you have a holiday population for a quarter of the year, maybe a third of the year, is our second largest city. There's over 4,000 people. Just as Sandy Point, which is something we'll have to deal with further down the track, is several thousand people. We need to actually deal with a sensible plan for the precinct that caters for those situations. But the other side of the equation is that Venus Bay is one of the fastest growing areas for housing in the Shire. On the figures I've got, which go up to 2015, it was the third fastest growing area, with about 17 to 20 houses being built a year. I've got the figures thanks to one of our directors, and I'll come back and be able to say what's happened in the interim period in the next 3 years when I've done it. But we are going to have to deal with a short-term population of Venus Bay that is likely to be over 1,000 people within the next 2 or 3 years. What we've got is a lot of baby boomers who are asset rich and cash poor in Melbourne who are going to be selling, and this process is starting to happen. The property market in Venus Bay is incredibly buoyant. I am told from locals that properties are being sold in a week. What's happened is that it is now the outer suburbs of Inverloch, and what you've got is a lot of BMWs, Audis and other types of vehicles reflecting a much higher level of socio-economic status of people moving in. If we don't do this type of planning now, we'll be picking up the cost down the track. And I agree with Councillor Rich. There are competing ideas at the moment, but we need to look at them in terms of the bigger context of what size the commercial core has to be, what's the retail area that's required, what's the parking that's required, and what then are the physical amenities, and do that in a coherent way, and then we can make decisions that aren't ad hoc, but are sensible and cost-effective through time. Thank you.
Councillor Argento, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe the three speakers have spoken quite well in regard to what the motion is to portray, so I'd ask that we put it to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Argento.
I was going to have a reply.
No, you won't, because there's no. All those in favour, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. We'll break it shortly.
You guys.
8.1, Organisational Performance Report. Do we have a mover? Councillor Keel. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rich. Councillor Keel, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a fantastic document. This is our report from July to December, and it shows Council's performance against the 2017-18 annual initiatives, performance indicators, capital works program, and department highlights. I'll just go through some of the highlights that are listed. We've implemented the In the Know, which is a free community engagement newsletter, which has gone right around the community, which is an excellent newsletter. We've supported the notice of motion for the e-petition regarding the South Gippsland bus services. We've received funding for the bridge over the railway line on the Ben Conrad Road. Coal Creek has been successful in receiving Tidy Towns Awards for the cultural heritage for their display of the McLean family. They've had a very successful annual Halloween night, the extremely successful Anne Frank exhibition. They've received funding for professional development for local primary school teachers, and they have increased visitor numbers. We've also completed our health and wellbeing plan, our domestic animal management plan. We've, as today, updated the economic development strategy. We've advocated for funding for the Leongatha streetscape, the railway corridor at Leongatha and Carramburra. Our council initiatives to have 30% of grant applications submitted to be fully funded. So far we've actually had 67% of those grant applications funded, which is an excellent result. 85% of the annual plan initiatives are on track. 100% of the council plan performance indicators are also on track or have been completed, and 69% of the capital works initiatives for 17-18 are either on track or completed. So I urge my fellow councillors to support the acceptance of this document, which is an excellent document. It's well done, well done.
Councillor Rich, do you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to concur with Councillor Keel. We have a number of particularly good staff in the South Gippsland site, and they do a wonderful job of bringing things together with the resources that they have. I think this is a way of trying to review and show that it also has a number of areas where we can improve, and those are the areas that I, of course, want to focus on. It's all fine and well to say how well we're doing, but I must say that with our overall state funding compared to what we should, we can improve. But regardless, we do have very good staff, and this is a good step in being able to really start to understand what's going on within our organisation. And I implore us to all read it, have a good look at it, see what we sort of evolve each year. So make us adopt it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Is there any speakers against this report? No. I'll put it to the vote then, councillors.
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now, 8.2, Councillor Expenditure Report. Do we have a mover?
On that.
Councillor Richard, Councillor Hill. I've nearly got the Coastal Ward Council tonight. Do we have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Councillor Hill.
Okay, there's a few interesting things in this report. There's been a lot of contention about, especially car expenditure claims over the last few months, especially for one particular paper. I'd like to point out the first column, council car operating costs, that is only for a 3-month period. Those figures are actually lower than the other travel reimbursement column, the second column, which is the private car use expenditures. So when you account for the fact that that's only for 3 months and the whole of the rest of the report is for 6 months, you find that by doubling the lowest claimed number of 2699, that figure comes to more than any of the figures in the private car use column. Now, the facts, we've been investigating this, which is cheaper, council car or private car, and the facts have come in. Everyone knows now, at least in this area here of the room, that the private car used by all councillors who use their own private car is cheaper than all the car expenses for the council cars. It is by far the cheaper method of providing travel for councillors to do their job. So I'd like to see that reported in the paper. The misinformation reported in the paper over the last 12 months and more about certain private councillors who use their private car for doing their council business as being ripping the ratepayer off, etc. That is totally not true. The facts are, if all councillors used their own private car, we would be charged the ratepayers less for that facility. I'm not suggesting councillors who use a council car have to change, but now that we have the facts on the table, we can all look at which is the best option for the ratepayer and our own particular circumstances. So, in closing, it would be good to see the newspapers report the facts of the matter, that the councillors are doing their job and using the most cost-effective way possible to get that job done.
Councillor Mitchell?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to concur with some of the observations of Councillor Hill. On my calculations, Council would save $24,000 in the last 12 months if we didn't provide council cars to councils. I'm not suggesting it. I heard Councillor Argento make a very sensible argument in one of our internal briefings where he said that we shouldn't be prohibiting someone who can't afford to buy a second car and family from running for council. So it makes sense to me there. But let us be truthful and transparent. All these expensive claims are legitimate claims. People who work harder for their constituents will have a higher cost, but in fact they're not making money. We're at one of the lowest cents per kilometre claims available. This to me is a silly waste of time focusing in on whether someone's 5 cents or 10 cents above or below someone, but let's place on record, because this has been thrown up 3 or 4 times in the local papers about councillors who are using their private vehicles in the high claim. The reality is that the break-even point for most people is to have, for most of the councillors is to have their own car and claim mileage rather than a council car. And the break-even point's, I think, nearly 14,000 kilometres a year. So let's have some truth in the papers about this, and let's not focus on this because the different levels of payment reflect, in fact, how different councils are working in their community. Some have more kilometres. I, for instance, are on 3 committees outside of the area, 2 in Melbourne, 1 there. Councillor Rich is on seats and he's used his vehicle to go up, which is in fact cheaper than flying. But that's not reflected in the figures. So let's not focus on the pennies and cents. Let's look at the real strategic issues financially for council. Thank you.
Is there any speakers against this, Councillor? Is there any speakers against? I'll put it to the vote then, councillors.
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move on. 4. 8.3, the Assembly of Councillors. Do we have a mover, please? Councillor Keel?
Can I move 8.3 and 8.4 in block?
Does anybody have any objection to moving 8.3 and 8.4 in block? If no one has any objection, we may move it. Thank you, Councillor Keel. A seconder, please, Councillor Skinner.
They're just procedural.
Procedural? Is there any speakers for? Any speakers against? We'll put it to the vote then, Councillor, as it's procedural.
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Now we have 9.1, which asks, are there any requests for leave of absence, Mr CEO?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councillor Edwards is seeking leave of absence until the 29th of March 2018.
Thank you, Mr CEO.
So, for a mover.
Oh, we have to move this, do we?
We now need a mover, Madam Mayor, that Councillor Edwards be granted.
Councillor Keel, Councillor
Which is not back to
Skinner.
June.
All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Are there councillor updates we're up to now? Are there any reports? I'll start with Council. You want to start first? Hey? No. No, I'll oblige, Councillor. Councillor Ridge, this is Councillor Ridge.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This has been a very busy time for all councils at this time of year. We've had festivals, we've had different conferences, and I know that everyone has been busy, even though this is our first official meeting for the year. I'm pretty sure that this isn't the first bit of work that each councillor has done for this year, so we've been particularly busy. I thought the Meaning Garlic Festival was particularly successful. We as a private business had our first stall there, but we also were involved and engaged. It's the second year that the festival has been run, and each year we learn and we get better and better, hopefully, at how things run. The feedback I got was particularly positive about it. But the area that I wanted to raise in particular of this councillor update was to do with the SEEDS conference. So I am the council's representative on South East Australian Transport Strategy Incorporated. I'm a director, so that means that I'm on the executive as well. We hosted this event this time jointly with Bass Coast at the RACV, and much to the credit of our Economic and Development Department, we had a presentation from certain groups looking at some potential projects that we could have in this area. SEEDS has, with myself, is putting a task force together to see how we can try and facilitate, because I think it's all right for us to say that Cube's already purchased the SO site down at Barry's Beach, and they of course are looking to be able to enhance that site to be able to service the possibility of the Star of the Sea, which is the Star of the South, which is the largest wind farm project off the coast of Australia. Now, I see that it's in our ward, and I happen to be that representative on that transport strategy group. So I certainly jumped up and said, well, can we work out how to work with all of our stakeholders to really give this the best opportunity of seeing through? To have a port on the east coast of Victoria that could service the whole of East Gippsland, South Gippsland, as well as West Gippsland, is of a significant nature. We already have transport corridor problems going up to the Port of Melbourne because of the rail lines, because of the Skyrail. So we've already got capacity constraints there. Now that the Port of Melbourne has been sold off for a long-term lease, that inhibits the development of Western Port. So this gives greater weight to the possibility that we could see a substantial port brought down into our region, which would service, as we said, all of the logging, all of the coal, as well as allow fertiliser. And as I understand it, there's also milk processing, which would go offshore from a new process, which would allow long life milk to last 55 days or something along those lines. So when we start looking at the possibilities of what this could deliver for us, it then allows us to raise our pipeline profile, which is to say that to get funding from the state for roads or rail, they do an economic evaluation, and they try and determine, well, what is the investment per dollar that I'm going to get back out the other end from the state. Now, if we can look at trying to get assets like this to this region, it means that for all of the other things that we apply for, roads, transport, whether it be rail one day, we're 20, 50 years, I'm not saying tomorrow, all of these things will be facilitated or helped along. So in this case, we're looking at, and I welcome all feedback from the community, fellow councillors, everyone. There is so many stakeholders involved. You've got ports, you've got coasts, you've got dwell, you've got parks, you've got council, you've got every objection group in the world that wants to not do anything as well. But we need to make sure we listen to everybody. We obviously will never please everyone, but if we can take on board the majority of people's perspectives and navigate a way to see something like this through, so that it's done in an environmentally sensitive way that looks after our community. I'm there to advocate for our community through this process, but I want to ensure that all of the other agencies, we're not throwing them off by saying, hey, you know, a few people are a bit upset. We will listen to everyone, we will do those things. This is a huge project for our region if we can get it. And so therefore I implore, A, number one, that we are part of seats, and B, that we can help facilitate this going forward. So to me, that's the main one that I wanted to discuss. There's a load of other projects which I'm sure other councillors are working on, and I am as well. But that one in particular is something that I really hope that we can sort of transform into something that can give the future of our region a massive and positive future.
Councillor Keogh, do you have any reports? Thank you, Councillor Richard.
Yes. Well, at the end of last year, of course, we all were very glad to have a bit of a break, I think, and come back to, I'm involved with the Citizens Advice Bureau, the Dunmore Community Centre and Progress Association. Apart from everything, the highlight for me was Australia Day. Both our Shire awards here, to our Citizen of the Year, a Movie North girl called Califury, so of course I would have to be waving that flag there. And the Garlic Festival receiving it for the event of the year, both extremely worthy recipients of a great award. Also was very involved with the Movie North Australia Day, at which Councillor Argento was our guest speaker, and we had about 100 people there, which was fantastic. I also opened the South Gippsland Golf Classic, which was 9 days at 9 courses, and started in Movie North, and I believe it's about 160 to 180 golfers came into the Shire. I think we threw just about everything at them weather-wise, from beautiful days to wind to rain to everything. I also was very, very involved with the Italian Festa this year, doing all the market stall holders, and it was an amazing event. It was unbelievable, to be honest. Excuse me. We had between 12 and 15,000 people there on the day, and it just was absolutely amazing to have so many people in our region, and it's really, really lifting our profile right across Melbourne. A lot of people are returning year after year, which I know the same thing will happen with the Garlic Festival. People get into the swing of it, and they know that there's such great events that it's worthy for them to come back to. I also opened the CWA Gippsland Hills Conference here last week, which is for 11 local Gippsland region CWAs, of which Coorong is the newest member, and has actually at the moment the most members. So congratulations.
No, I don't cook, Scott.
That's what I say too, I don't cook. But unfortunately I did miss the music for the people at Mosvale Park, but I believe that was an excellent event last Sunday. So thank you.
Councillor Brown, do you have any reports, or do you want me to come in? Councillor McEwen, I imagine you've got a report.
I've got a couple of things I could report on, Madam Mayor. Can I congratulate the Newbury community? I went up there and it was just overwhelming in numbers of people. And I'm going to try Councillor Pugh was selling part of one local group, and I'm trying it tonight. So I'll see whether the 750 tourist place was good. And that was fantastic. And the Garlic Festival, can I thank all of our fellow councillors. We had the Mayor and Councillor Edwards came and saw it, but we had, which was extraordinary, and I thank you genuinely, all of the other councillors volunteered. I've got some wonderful photographs of us running the sack race.
With a megaphone.
With a megaphone. And I've got one which I didn't put up on my Facebook page of Councillor Rich doing the hula hoop. I thought we didn't need to have that. That was enough. But leaving those aside, I think it's a credit to the whole community. I agree with you, it's raising the profile of the area in Melbourne massively. And that's, I think, reflected since the Italian Fiesta last year and the Garlic Festival. We've basically reduced the available housing for sale down to 2002 levels according to local real estate. There's been a massive boost of people paying attention and buying and moving into the area. The only other thing I'd like to point out, Council is a member of the Rail Freight Alliance. The Rail Freight Alliance is councillors from one end of New South Wales and Victoria, with a focus on saying we need to have a proper rail freight network across the whole of Victoria. They are non-partisan and non-political. They have been extremely successful. They've got $440 million into the Mallee freight upgrade, and so they're going to have a freight logistics system for the whole of the western part of the state based on Geelong and Portland and Melbourne ports that will be cost effective for people. They have just put out their policy document for elections for this year. Their focus after getting that commitment and working through that is basically onto Shepparton-Wangaratta corridor and Gippsland corridor. So they have got in this that we need to have 4 railway lines from Caulfield to the Dandong corridor, which is the rail capacity that Councillor Rich was talking about. They've got as a commitment to assess the reinstatement of the Leongatha-Cranbourne line. There are already preliminary planning being done to take the Cranbourne line to Clyde. There is some stuff occurring on the Mayoral Sands. There's 80 VWs a day. There's exports going through the Port of Geelong overseas now. That is basically cutting up our roads. It's not cost effective. And the issue of the wind farm and the Kew port and Port Anthony, zircon will be exported out of that port not in the immediate future, but I'm very confident that in the next 10 years, it's more than likely we'll have the railway line back for all sorts of reasons, but economic ones because you just cannot get into Melbourne. And the other thing which is really, really important for us is that they're supporting the integrated transport plans, which is one of the Council's key priorities. They recognise that freight does connect in with other transport things, but what they're saying is we should have support for integrated transport plans that look at the interconnection between road, rail, freight and people movements, and that again will support us. They've already seen Minister Jacinta Allen with a very favourable hearing on that report, but they're intending, as I said, to be a much stronger advocate for the rest of the state because their focus has been highly successful getting 400 million for the western part of the state. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner, I'll quit from the top of the table down, so I'll go do the same on your side. Councillor Skinner, you're up. Have you got a report? Do you want to someone else?
I know, it's just, I won't thank you, because I've been sick most of the day. One thing I just wanted to mention was, as Councillor Keel said, great having a break over January from council duties, even though we were undertaking other duties, but gave me a good perspective and a new approach for this year, so that's really appreciated. And one of my ideas was I'm just not going to say yes to everything. However, I really misread a situation, and so I simply want to apologise to that community. The Port Wetherspool Marine Precinct plan came out for public consultation late last year, and actually the 3 coastal road councils did go down there twice before this, but there was a public meeting that was held there over January, and I thought there was a lot of councillors going, so I ended up not going, and I left Councillor Argento with a letter. It was a really big, quite passionate meeting. But, so I want to apologise to that community for not being there, but equally what I really love is the fact that people are willing to have their say, and when we were down there, and I believe Councillor Argento found this as well, there's some really great solutions that come when you actually engage with the community. So I would urge us to continue doing that, and I have said it over and over again today, that's the areas I will be working on championing through our respective council, but I'll let Councillor Argento report on that.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Argento.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've listened to our fellow councillors here talk about the various events that have been held over the summer, and some fabulous events and great organisational skills with the communities to get those events up and running. But just a reminder that behind the scenes, council staff also work on those events, whether it be the groundskeepers or community strengthening teams to fill in the gaps. They do a fabulous job. They're always approachable, and they make these events a reality towards the end of their planning. So hats off to those staff members who contribute to those events. In regard to the Marine Precinct down at Port Washington, it wasn't that bad of an event. There was a considerable amount of people there, and they all voiced their opinions, and that's what we're here to listen to. When we implement our policies, we need to listen to what our communities are saying, and hopefully we'll take those, I certainly will take those comments on board when we come to the decisions at that point in time. So thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Yes, I don't normally mention things I've been to and that, but the Meaning Gala Festival was amazing. Yeah, I reckon the next 15,000 people. They were sat on the information stand just counting them. And that was
You're a mathematician, Councillor Hill.
And the other highlight was looking across the oval and seeing the sack race. I don't know how she did it. But Alison Skinner was in the sack. Sorry, she was in a sack and running down the. She was in competition against the kids jumping, but she was looking at the kids. She was going sideways, and she had a megaphone in her mouth going up slow. I could not compare now. It all worked together. And I do apologise, I didn't get down to drive your bus. I did get the email about going down to drive, but when I said to the wife that I'm being invited by Alison to go down for a drive at Minutes Bay, she said, no way. So, on a serious matter, I did go to the audit committee as an observer, and I'd have to say it was, as a report of that, it was a well-run exercise and very positive experience.
Right, thank you. Yes, Councillor. Most point is Councillor Skinner could probably manage to talk and run at the same time. But sorry, Councillor Skinner.
I'm going to run around this table.
Well, as Mayor, of course, there's just been so many community events over the summer. The Garlic Festival, the Italian Festival, which I had the pleasure of opening that and standing up there on the what was it? The stage, I suppose it was a stage, whatever. Well, I'm looking down there was definitely, there was at least 8,000 people looking at me, and there was another 8,000 buying Councillor Keel's pasta.
Expensive pasta. Premium value added self-defense.
So anyway, we've got that. That was they were really good events, and I really don't. They were great events. Carrabburra Show, Foster Show, I attended also with Councillor Brown. They really done it well. Carrabburra was down a little, but those events are still really important. About a week ago, I met with Russell Broadbent and some people that were having issues with transitioning into the NDIS. They think that it'll be good. This is the people with special children. So that was great to be able to attend that and hear the issues they've got. It's only a transition. They think the program will be very good once it gets going. Bena Tennis Club the other night, barbecue, it was really good. And that was a result of grant money that we granted them, and they did crowdfunding and raised quite a bit more to fix up their courts for in the future and make them a lot safer. It was a great night back way home. Legacy. The RSL Legacy was on Sunday, and that's about the recognitions of the legatees, they call them, the volunteers for our returned, for our widows, and so that was a great day to recognise and understand all about that. Also met, what do you call him, MV Tim Knott? Was he? No? I might not miss that one. Down the Sand Quarry, and really this is about. No, he wasn't. Tim Palace. Oh, now I get the right. Yeah, the Treasurer. Minister Palace down the Sand. That was a really great experience, and that was something that we'd already initiated and was in front of the game about trying to start off getting all the sand overlays done in this area for the future. So, yeah, that's just a brief overview. I won't go into detail. GLG and his interesting seats was very good, as Councillor Rich said, so let's move on. That's the end of councillor reports, I believe. Now I better get my thing. Yes. Committee updates. Do we have any committee updates?
There are no committee updates, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Except the Audit Committee.
Yes, which is back here.
No.
You're noting, apparently.
Are we? Oh.
Yes.
Let's have a look.
But that's in committee updates.
Oh, I thought that's what you just said.
You did.
Well, they've got it in there twice. All right, we have. Would anyone like to move the Audit Committee report, please?
I'd like to move that we note the Audit Committee report.
Do you,
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry. Now with you.
is that all you do?
Yeah, apparently that's it.
Councillor Skinner seconded. Thanks.
I see.
We're just noting because we're
Noting,
noting the
yes.
report.
We put that to the vote.
Is there any
Doesn't need a vote.
Doesn't it?
Oh,
pardon?
there you go. Natasha says it doesn't need a vote.
Right. I don't know why we're moving it and seconding it.
Yeah, sorry, you hadn't been read properly, so I thought I'll put it there just in case you...
Okay.
Right.
Move on then.
So we're not
That's
voting
what's
on
there.
accepting that.
Put out there.
Yes.
It's all right.
Do we have a move for the motion? Do we have a second? Is there anyone against it?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
We'll get it on.
Oh,
Fix that process.
fix me notes.
Sorry about that. Madam Mayor.
Do we have any urgent or other business?
No, we
as I said,
don't have any urgent or other business.
Public questions?
So public questions session. So the petition and joint letters is the next section.
Right. Petitions. Are there any petitions? Councillor Hill. Well, I've got Councillor Hill here. Is that the same one as Ray?
No.
No, right. 1, 2, 3 along the figures.
Yeah.
Councillor
I've
Hill.
been asked to submit this petition from the Holden Mountain Trail Management Group. Road declaration that part of Fish Creek, Quarry Road, Fish Creek be retained for public use and incorporated into the Holden Mountain Trail. The petitioners support the Holden Mountain Trails Management Group's request to South Gippsland Shire Council that Council should retain that part of the Fish Creek Quarry Road from Fish Creek Foster Road to Beers Road for public use and incorporation into the Holden Mountain Trail. And the lead petitioner is Tony Walker. And there's 274 petitions.
I think we've got to go through. Do we have a mover to...
He moved it.
I'll second it if you table.
Yep. That's it.
And here are laid on the table.
That's what we do. The motion is that Madam Mayor, the council receive and note the petition and the petition lay on the table until the matter is considered and decided on at the ordinary council meeting in April.
Thank you. All those in favour?
So who was the seconder? Councillor McEwen was the seconder.
Councillor Hill was the
Mover.
mover. I'm just waiting for him to catch up, that's
Thank
all.
you.
All those in favour? Do we have
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor. Yes, we do.
any other petitions?
Yes.
Councillor
Thank you,
Argento.
Madam Mayor. I have a petition here from the South Gippsland Bass Swimming Club. As you'll be aware, they spoke in a presentation last week. The prayer on the petition says, we ask that South Gippsland Shire Council will remove the lane hire charge for the South Gippsland Bass Swimming Club. So I move that we place it on the table until the response can be made.
Seconded, Councillor Rich.
Councillor Keel seconding it.
So moved by Councillor Gento, seconded by Councillor Keel.
All those in favour of accepting this petition?
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Do we have any other petitions? Yes, Councillor Skinner.
I have a petition from the Venus Bay community with the lead petitioner who is Sam Enos from Edge of the Earth in Venus Bay. We, the undersigned, support the establishment of a skate park facility in Venus Bay. The preferred location is on the corner of Jupiter Boulevard and Central Road, Venus Bay 3956. The heading is "We want a skate park for our Venus Bay community." There are, I think there's about 500 odd signatures on that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't count them. So I would like to lay that on the table. Note the petition.
Councillor Skinner's moving this and Councillor Richards seconding this one, please. Okay. Would you like to speak?
Yes.
No, only if it's about laying it on the table.
Yeah.
I would like to acknowledge an alternate petition on the same matter.
You'll have to do that secondly.
That's another
That's another petition.
Really, I don't have it. I'm just acknowledging that there is.
No, you can't.
You can't do that. Vote. Yes, thanks, Councillor.
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Do you have another petition, Councillor Skinner? No. Thank you.
When you do have your look
I don't have it. It's an online thing.
But you can.
you want to get next time?
No.
Thank you. Right.
Let's just go.
There's an answer to petitions.
There's an answer.
Petitions.
Yes.
You right with that?
Yeah.
So,
Where are we at to? Yeah, just ask if there's any.
is there, are there any submitted public questions, Mr. CEO?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have submitted public questions from Mr. Blau, which will be included in the minutes, and the responses also. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll have a 5-minute break and we'll move into closed.
Move into closed, then we have break.
Oh, we'll move into closed session.
Do we have a mover?
Do I have a mover? Councillor Keel, Councillor Hill. Seconder, please.
Yeah.
Second. Can I move?
So Councillor seconded by Councillor Hill. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Is that the other thing?
Yep.
We might know, we'll do. Now, Councillor, we've only got one thing to do in closed session.
Madam Mayor, what we'll do now is we'll adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes to clear the gallery.
Yes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, we'll adjourn the meeting to clear the gallery. Please, councillors, be back at 3:46. 3:46, councillors.
Actually, so Councillor, stay in your chairs. Just go there and come
What I want to know is what you do with that one. I don't know. I have to know. I have to do that.